Cool. So now we're going to talk about a project that we started 10 years ago. And the question that was coming about was work that we were doing with our colleagues. We were doing work with Steve Waddell, our colleague, who was working on the Global Action Networks at the time and GANNet, and was starting up an organization called iScale. And we were deeply involved in that, and looking at strategy, structure, and governance in a community of practice. And one of the meetings that we at the Institute for Strategic Clarity hosted was, we called a Clarity Forum. We met at Essex in Massachusetts and brought a lot of the folks together from that SSG, or Strategy, Structure, and Governance community of practice of iScale together. And that was a dozen to 2 dozen people from different networks looking at how do you think about strategy, structure, and governance. And one of the questions that came up is, well, how would you possibly do a strategy process within a global network? And could you do a system strategy process within that? And soon thereafter, we were in, I remember right, we went to Geneva for a bunch of gatherings of iScale, and we had another SSG community of practice meeting. And there we were also meeting with Dacil Acevedo, who was one of the global representatives for Latin America of one of the networks, the Global Action Networks. And you and she were talking and said, well, we could try, and how could we do this? And she was working with a global network called Global Action Network called the Youth Employment Systems at the time. It was a campaign that's still going to create employment for youth worldwide. And they're in 55 countries, something.
55 countries.
55 countries, and have had a massive impact on people paying attention to the topic of and creating ministries for and sectors for youth employment around the world. And it's a cross-sectoral network, meaning that they're working not only at the global to local level within each country and each region within each country, they're also working across civil society, government, business, academia, and trying to bring all this together. And so you and Dacil said, well, why not try? And since you also have the base not only in the United States, but also in Mexico, and being Mexican, you said, well, let's start with Latin America and see what we could do. And so what I understand was you set up a bunch of interviews with Dacil and her colleagues, 20-something interviews, interviewing academics, the leaders of the different networks within each of the different countries across Latin America, some of the academics, and the staff again in 12 of the countries, was it?
12 countries.
12 of the countries, and starting to get an idea from the strategic clarity questions, using the managing from clarity process at the time. So this was about 10 years ago in 2008 that you started this in the spring and moved into the summer and early fall. And so through these interviews, you were able to put together a systems map of what all of the activities we're trying to achieve within any country. What were the 3 different P's? And those were policy,
programs, and partnerships.
Policy, programs, partnerships, and policy as a way of working at the national and local level to go create jobs for kids, changing the policies that do that, programs for that, and partnerships across the sectors to support the creation of jobs for youth. And what you started to see was a fuller picture of all of these partial pictures everybody was getting of the kinds of things that they were taking up towards these 3 Ps. And what I remember, you were able to come up with a picture of what a full program looks like that can achieve this goal through these 3 Ps, and what is the role of the partnerships, the programs, and the policies, and what is the role of the network in supporting the network working, what is the work of the network staff themselves, both within a country, across the region, and globally, and supporting global policy and local action for creating youth. And you were then able to bring back to the community in a presentation that you did in Panama of your initial results. And then we share some of that presentation in the database, in the knowledge base, as well as a presentation you did a few months later at Harvard for this same group, the SSG community practice of iScale. to share this is what a whole network looks like, and this is what it can look like within a country. And what they're doing in each of these countries is figuring out, based on the local skill sets and resources, that they're able to deliver parts of that. But one of the questions that they had is, what does a full program look like? And we don't really know. And what does the network's role in that? So anyways, to come back, you were able to, through all of that, show that you can do a network system strategy. You can see what the purpose of the network is, the purpose of the system at the global policy to local action level, and how they can learn with and from each other and support each other across the network in these countries. I'm finding even ways to say, oh, we'd love to have that program. I didn't even know you could do that because we hadn't organically figured that out, but you did. So they can start strategic conversations across the network to learn with and from each other. So I think this is another great project to start seeing in a very pioneering way. Look, you can apply these systemic strategic tools. It's useful to see. And so what I'd like to explore with you a little bit in that work that you did with them, what were some of the, we covered some of the process of setting up an intention to understand the system, and what is the value of the network in the system, and what's happening across the regions, and how can we learn from each other, the different countries. And in the process was setting up interviews, interviewing them, doing the systems mapping, pulling it all together, and then sharing with them what could be seen by pulling it all together. And so I'd like to ask you now from that, what do you see as some of the key insights that you'd like to share? And I mentioned one of them was some of the conversation that you had with some of the network leaders, even the founder of the network, of the ability to see themselves within a complex system. And so maybe you could share a little bit about that insight of being able to see the role of a network in a healthy living system and the ability to see oneself.
I think because each leader in each country they choose their own way to create jobs for the youth. So most of them were associated with another NGO, because instead of starting from zero, Poonam, the creator of the GAN, said, go try to find a partner. So partner with someone locally and see if you can help them do whatever they wanted to do, and if they can help you and support you to be part of the YES network. To me, instead of everybody working in isolation, so this is my country, I'm trying to do the best I can in my own country, they had very few opportunities once a year or once every 2 years to get together to share. So that was a very limited way to interact. So yes, we are all working in the same purpose, but we are not working together. So by doing the system and trying to see the whole network, what does YES Global is intended to do with the whole network, just open a lot of possibilities when they saw the map, because they were able to see all the pieces in one place. So now I can understand how the universities, how the NGOs, the private sector, the government, the civil society can really work together in pro of the goal. So it was at time overwhelming, because it was a lot to map a network. It was challenging for me to try to see a network. It was easier for a time to now I understand how to map an organization, but that was my first time trying to map a network, and it was very, very useful to just be in the information and trying to understand what is a network, how does a network really operate, and can we have a strategic plan of the whole network. And this was the Latin America. I tried to do the Latin America, so we will see if it can work for one part of the network, and if we could make it work, if we can extend it to the whole network. But it was just a matter of numbers. We obviously can do the whole network, And some of the learnings is, even though we are all working towards the same goal to create jobs for the youth, each country was very different. Mexico was incubators. How can I create entrepreneurs? Peru was green jobs. Their partner was an green NGO. So what they wanted to do is create green jobs. But others were, for example, creating jobs for the people, for the young ones that were in jail. When they leave jail, just imagine that even the ones that leave the university cannot find always a good job. Just imagine if you have been in jail. So the programs were very different. The resources in each country were very different. And just the interaction of all of them, seeing different possibilities and the way they were doing differently, it was very enriching for all of them. We start creating capabilities and knowledge base so we can cross over. So don't start from zero. Colombia was fantastic changing the laws to include youth for the organizations. Please, it's not that you be a good citizen if you hire young people in your organization. It was, they changed the law for that to happen. So it was very possible. Each leader were fantastic, just designing their own way to go about it and learning from each other. So what about if we can start seeing what everybody's doing and learning from each other? And if I want to do that as you did, can I call you? Can you help me and walk me through, instead of everybody's trying to do everything from zero? So it was a good understanding that there are many different ways to accomplish the goal, and many of them have failed, many of them have succeeded. So how can we learn from both, from failing and succeeding?
And I think one of the things that you were able to do by doing that and mapping all of them together was to show how they interlink to be able to support each other. So there's not 5 completely different activities. And if they're 5 different, you know what, we're doing R2, I know how to do in my community with my partner, and we just don't need these other 3, but to show how they fit together, to say, oh, if we change the policy and we have these programs, or we change the policies and we have these partnerships, and we can offer these programs, which we couldn't offer on our own. So we could start to see, when I went to the national, or to the global summit and met you, and you went to the one in Baku and said, I heard all these great things that you did, but I didn't know how to see how they all fit together. But with the picture that you created in the Latin region, and Latin American region, then they could start to say, oh, not only do I see how they fit together, but if I really want to achieve this, then I actually need these other perspectives that I didn't understand before, but I see them, and I could see a partner with them. And what I heard you say is, I have a partner within our network, and somebody hosting another region or country, and I can come ask you, how did you talk to the lawyers? How did you get the penal system to engage? How did you get the entrepreneurs to get, or how did you get the government to support the technology incubators? Because I'm interested in that, but I don't see how to. But then, so we could start to have a strategic conversation across the region, which adds to how cool what you're doing, but I don't know how to do what you're doing. And I don't know if I see the relevance from my work of that. Now I can say, I see the relevance, I see it's cool, and I know somebody can help me do it, and I see how it fits, so I can bring in a different partnership that can help me do that.
Yeah, and it's like Samuel in Mexico was working directly with Secretaría de Economía, and they support and do all the job to create the incubators. So because it was happening in Mexico, he said, I will go and help do the same thing in other countries. So you can go and ask your government, look, it is already working in Mexico. Let's do the same thing. So
right, so you don't have to invent it. You can actually show, not only is it possible, and this is how it would leverage things, but here's an example, and somebody I know who's done it, who will come because of our partnership in the network and support me in talking to you about how to get it done.
Yeah,
exploring that. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Did you see any other shifts that come to mind or experiences in the participants of being able to see this for themselves?
I think it was powerful to be able to see the whole in that way, because they have lived through it. But seeing all the interactions, and I didn't know when this happened will have an effect in this, and this can help me. So it was just putting the whole story, because the story was not so simple. Bringing together civil society, businesses, and governments together to work towards a goal, it is not done many times. I mean, it's only a few times that you can see that. And for them, seeing their country and what's happening and trying to reflect that and use that information to help themselves. So it was helpful for them to see the whole and see their own country. Why is my country doing so little? Or why is your country doing so much? How are you doing? So it helped them. It gives them perspective. It open possibilities. It informed them. I think it was a good resource for them. And we proposed a second part of the project that we couldn't find financing for that, but it was just to create all the activities for the whole because we were not able to move it that way. What we did is we start looking at the strategic resources that each country has, and then we start doing a strategic plan for each country. So I work with some of the leaders, especially with the one in Mexico, obviously, because I live part of my time in Mexico. And we start seeing and analyzing the resources. As soon as we start seeing some resources in red, we use it as red, yellow, and green, just to see the state of our strategic resources. He started just, why is that in red? It's because you don't have this. The next day he went and hired the people to make that resource green. So he acted immediately. He was really, really, really cool. So we start taking advantage of all the map we created, and some people use them to create their strategic planning.
That's great. One of the things I also remember about this is from a few years before, we had already been doing what we were calling at the time the systemic view of the organizational map. So starting to take the whole map and sort of saying, this is a section that belongs to this kind of responsibility, this kind. And in this case, you brought more of the artistic and graphic piece to put colors and make it more beautiful for people to see. And I think, one, it was aesthetically pleasing, and that was true. But what it started to help to do, I think, very nicely was for people to say, that's me, that's where I am, and this is how I fit into the system, and to make that even more present for themselves. And to say, oh, I now see my role, because in many of these kinds of things, especially in this case of global policy and local action across 55 countries and trying to understand what's happening and being learned and what's happening and all that work, be able to see oneself in the role of the network. How does shifting how human beings interact across these sectors and across initiatives, across countries at these different levels is very difficult. And this graphical form of using the strategic systems mapping seemed to be very helpful. And that's what's the feedback we got of, I can now see myself in the role and what you're doing in other communities within my network. So I have a deeper appreciation. Not only was it really cool that you were able to get government funding to do this, but I actually understand what you did, how it led to our goal, how it fits into my picture, and that I could actually, with you, figure out a way to do that within my own environment. And so strengthen the network and the conversation across the network as well. So I think it's a great, great picture. And we have on the website some of the presentations, the materials that you did, how that was developed, the piece I was just talking about, how that was shown graphically, and a couple of articles and presentations that you did in Panama and in at Harvard, and a paper that you've written up on this explaining some of it. So those are other things. Sort of to wrap up, I was wondering, are there any other sort of thoughts you've had about the experiences or shifts or insights that you'd like to share for now? Or
there was another thing that we come up with in doing some drawings, is how does each country work with the 3 sectors. Some of them were very advanced, where the government talked to the business and to the civil society, or just the leader was like only the center. He will talk to the government and come back and do whatever, and then the leader will go and talk to the universities, or will, so that he will be like this, the speaker of the intention, but there was not interaction among the other stakeholders. Others were a little more sophisticated, where there was already a relationship among the stakeholders. So it was very informative to see at what level of development the each country was. So I did different drawings to understand what was the dynamics with the leader and the stakeholders of the different sectors. So that was very informative, like, oh, even though most of them are working with government and universities and public sector, the relationship is not the same. The development of the relationship is not the same. This stage where they were not the same. So that helped understanding what kind of results are you expecting from this level of development or this level. So it was good to know, and not to ask too much. Like, you know what, I can barely talk to this guy that has some relationship here, and he said that he might do this. Others have huge, deep, loyal relationships that were very good for them, and they were able to do much more. So it was good. It was good to understand that even at the same stage of development.
excellent. So it is possible to do a strategic systems mapping of a global network and see what happens at a whole region like Latin America, and how we can learn within and across countries level work, a very local action work. We can learn with and from each other by using this kind of approach. And in the case material, we show how you documented that and facilitated that conversation. That's great. Well, thank you very much, Luzma.
You're welcome.